Good evening. I want to begin, first of all, just by saying, offering a word of thanks to Dr. McCarthy for her good work at the center and in organizing this and all of these conferences. Thank you very much. Our culture has apparently made its peace with assisted reproductive technologies, which are now responsible for the births of some 4 million children worldwide. This peace is premised upon the assumption that these technologies raise no fundamental questions about the meaning of human being, that how we are conceived and by whom are accidental matters with no great consequence for the meaning of personal identity or for human flourishing. One indication that this premise is a lie is the fact that the subject of ARTs is so difficult to talk about. Type "what to tell children born of IVF" into Google, and you will be virtually transported into a sad world of anxiety, shame, defiance, and bewilderment. The questions multiply exponentially and become all the more unanswerable the further one moves from natural marriage and natural procreation. What do you tell a child who was frozen in cryopreservation, so that his twin, who is now 2 years older than he, could be born first? How do you tell a child that she was the lucky one who was selected for her healthy genetic profile or her gender from among her 5 embryonic siblings? How do you say to the child of 2 women who, legally speaking, does not have a father, that his father was a donor? What do you say to the child whose mother, in the words of the film we're about to see, was a breeder? Such questions are unanswerable because they are almost unimaginable, a frightening indication that technology has increased our power to act well beyond our power to think, and perhaps beyond our power to control. And yet most of us already inhabit this world in some form or fashion. We all know and love children conceived by these means. We all know friends and family who have taken recourse to ARTs in their desperation to have a child. Perhaps some of us may have done so. And whenever I write or speak about this topic, something I never really set out to do and something which I don't particularly enjoy, I always wonder whether I might be speaking to someone conceived through ARTs and whether they will perceive my remarks as cruel or as questioning their humanity. So I want to begin this symposium by saying 2 things that should go without saying. First, if, as the Catholic faith teaches, the human person is a child, and a child is a gift, not just in its origins, but in its very ontological structure, then no human act, no human intervention in the genesis of the child can erase this fundamental gift character. So a child conceived through IVF or through ISCI is no less human, no less a child, no less a gift, and thus no less worthy of his life or worthy of love than a child conceived through procreation. Nor should we doubt that parents who resort to ARTs love their children. Indeed, their willingness to submit themselves to the great expense, anxiety, and indignity of IVF and other ARTs can be seen as a sign of their willingness to sacrifice and to suffer on their child's behalf. Secondly, the desire of a couple for a child is a good and natural thing, and the anguish and the desperation of infertility which often drives people to ARTs is a great burden to suffer. However critical we may be of ARTs, we cannot forget the terrible suffering that makes them such a temptation. All of this suffering, and there's plenty of it to go around, whether this technology succeeds or fails, creates an enormous inducement not to think deeply about the meaning of ARTs, to accept the gentleman's agreement that undergirds this peace, the gentleman's agreement of silence that undergirds this peace. This settlement is tempting, considering how close this cuts to human identity and to so much that we hold dear, but it is nevertheless a bargain that we can ill afford. For in saying yes to ARTs, our culture has said yes to much more than it originally bargained for. ARTs have given us a world in which it is now considered normal for thousands upon thousands of so-called spare embryos to be frozen away in cryopreservation, awaiting a tenuous fate. ARTs are the sine qua non for embryonic stem cell research, germline manipulation, and a host of other brave new eugenical fantasies dreamed up not just in semi-private biotech ventures such as the J. Craig Venter Institute, but in leading universities such as Harvard, Princeton, and UCLA. ARTs are the condition of possibility for the invention of same-sex marriage and for contemporary efforts to redefine the family independent of sex, gender, and marriage, which will make it all but impossible to regulate the Wild West that is the present fertility industry, which will catalyze new agendas for research and create markets for new bioengineered products that would otherwise be unthinkable and unnecessary. And the decoupling of sex and procreation has given rise to a surrogacy industry that often leads to a quagmire domestically and to the exploitation and virtual servitude of poor women abroad. Of course, all of this will have an enormous effect on the future shape of society, on whether and to what extent our children's children live under some sort of technological totalitarianism. And it will undoubtedly have, indeed is already having, a profoundly existential effect for those conceived by these means and under these new arrangements. ARTs thus provoke fundamental questions about human identity, human origins, about motherhood, fatherhood, about the human body and human nature itself, which cannot be suppressed. And the fact that this technology implicates us in matters of such profundity compels us to consider two further questions that go well beyond the usual moral question of the use or misuse of this technology. First, whether in saying yes to ARTs, our culture has already decided these questions and decided them in favor of a new, unprecedented, and ultimately post-human vision of human nature. And second, whether at the heart of this technology and this view of life, there is a violence that harms those who succeed by it as well as those who fail by it, and that contradicts in practice the love that we have for our children. There are many ways and many vantage points from which to pose questions this vast, a number of which will emerge in the course of this symposium. We may ask these questions as a matter of philosophical anthropology, or from the point of view of medical and biological science. We may consider them in conjunction with the rise of same-sex marriage and new definitions of family that are rapidly acquiring the force of law. We may ask these questions from the point of view of the burden and the expectations that this technology places on women. And we may consider these questions from perspectives too often ignored or even silenced. The perspectives of children conceived through these technologies, and the women, such as surrogates, who are exploited by them. Jennifer Lahl has made it her life's work to give voice to these silent perspectives. A pediatric critical care nurse for 25 years, Jennifer is founder and president of the Center of Bioethics and Culture Network. Her writings have appeared in various publications, including the San Francisco Chronicle, the Dallas Morning News, and the American Journal of Bioethics. As a field expert, she is routinely interviewed on radio and television, including ABC, CBC, PBS, and NPR. She is also called upon to speak alongside lawmakers and members of the scientific community, even being invited to speak to members of the European Parliament in Brussels to address egg trafficking. And I believe the film that we saw tonight, or is it Exploitation? This film that we're going to see tonight has been shown there now twice. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about that when the time comes. She serves on the North American Editorial Board for Ethics in Medicine and on the Board of Reference for Joni Eareckson Tada's Institute on Disability. And I'm sure there are many more things besides. Jennifer has given voice to the voiceless and cast a bright light on the seamy underside of the fertility industry through a series of remarkable and highly acclaimed films. Lines That Divide, the Great Stem Cell Debate was an official selection in the 2010 California Independent Film Festival and provided an in-depth look at the moral and human hazards of stem cell research. Exploitation, which received an award for Best Documentary by the California Independent Film Festival and has sold in more than 20 countries, investigated the legal trafficking in human eggs, the techniques by which young women are persuaded to sell their eggs, and the risks that this poses to them. Anonymous Father's Day, which was shown here at the Institute in 2012, was a powerful look at the experience and the suffering of the adult children of sperm donors. And tonight we are honored to see and to discuss her latest film, Breeders, a Subclass of Women, which considers the multitude of problems associated with the growing surrogacy industry. I can think of no better or more powerful introduction to this symposium on assisted reproductive technologies than this. And it is my great pleasure to welcome back to the John Paul II Institute and to the Center for Cultural and Pastoral Research our friend Jennifer Law.